So welcome everyone. Dawn, I don't know if you wanted to give a welcome.
Sure, absolutely. Just just wanted to say thank you all for coming today. And kind of a lot of you are folks that end up participating on a regular basis. We appreciate that you value the education. Thank you for being here.
Listen,
Please mute. Please check to make sure you're muted. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Dawn. So Dawn mentioned about artificial intelligence and using unauthorized tools such as those creating recordings of the session. We do reserve the right to exit trainees from the training if they are using AI to take notes without prior approval or using AI to record the session. So just a reminder for that. Also, in terms of materials and the recording, materials and recordings will no longer be emailed to participants. We're changing the process a bit, and materials will be uploaded to the chat during today's session. And please note that facilitators will upload the PowerPoint and PDF. So I'll upload the materials today during our session towards the middle to the end of the webinar, just to make sure everyone is able to get it. And the recording of today's session will be available on the HCA FCS channel, which is here approximately 2 weeks after the session. So when I upload my materials into the chat, you'll have the links to this. So today we are going to be looking at using motivational interviewing in supported employment or supported education or other career services that you're providing. And specifically, we're going to talk about listening for change talk. So we're going to do a little bit of a definition of motivational interviewing and its use in employment services. So maybe you've attended some motivational interviewing webinars or sessions in the past. Because this is the Innovations in Career Services call, we really are hoping to frame the examples and really look at it through the lens of employment services. We're also going to differentiate between sustained talk and change talk and talk a little bit about those and how to amplify change talk while we're minimizing sustained talk. And then we're also going to look at some different skills to elicit change talk and minimize sustained talk. So just a little bit of a background on motivational interviewing. Since about 1990, there have been over 1,200 published studies on MI, as well as over 200 randomized clinical trials. And this research really reflects a variety of practice sessions, modalities, behavior changes, and different settings. And for our purposes today, we're framing this under employment services. MI began in part as an alternative to the traditional directive and sometimes confrontational approaches that were used in substance use treatment. It's really grown since then to support people making changes in a variety of settings. Let's look at some of the, so as as mentioned, many programs such as supported employment, supported education, housing, other case management type settings, all can potentially use motivational interviewing. So to get into the core of today's session, really talking about change talk and sustained talk. People use various words and phrases to convey their reasons for making a change. Sometimes the person may also share with you the reasons against making a change or for keeping things the same, the status quo. In motivational interviewing, these are referred to as change talk and sustained talk. Making a change is difficult, and often we have reasons for changing and reasons for not changing or keeping things the same. And this can sometimes feel like a tug of war to the person internally. And how the practitioner, how you all how we respond to both change talk and sustained talk can really impact the likelihood of the change occurring. So, change talk is any talk from the person that favors movement toward or supports a change of their target behavior um, or their goal. Change talk can express the person's desires, their ability, their reasons, and the need to change. It can also convey their optimism about making a change and the benefits of succeeding in succeeding in the change. And the practitioner should acknowledge, reinforce, and summarize change talk when they hear it. So, for example, if a person who has been considering going back to school, but also has expressed ambivalence about it, shares that their new job has a requirement that they obtain their bachelor's degree, the practitioner can highlight this person's change talk. They could say something like, it sounds like you might be thinking about returning to school sooner than expected because of these new job requirements. So you're listening for that change talk and you're reflecting back what the person is telling them. You're highlighting that change talk. So there are two types of change talk. The first is preparatory change talk, or a discussion of the person's desire, ability, reason, and need for change, also known in MI by the acronym DARN. It's important to understand the different types of change talk so you can recognize them when you hear it. So D is the person's desire to change. Desire for change can be identified by use of words like want, I'd like to, I wish. It can sound like if someone is in a job that they're not happy with, it might sound like, I would like to get a better job. Or if someone is um, considering their social skills, they might say something like, I wish I were more comfortable around people. Or I hope to get A's and B's in school next year. While desire for change is important, it's not absolutely necessary for change. And people can make changes because they have to, even if they don't want to. So, what might be an example of a change that uh, people might have to make, even if they don't want to? You can use the chat. So, someone might not have a desire to make the change, but they might have to make it. Let's see. They might be moving, they might get fired, court obligations, a divorce, absolutely. So you got it. Um, my landlord sold my house, now I have to move, quitting drugs or job changing. Thank you. That's a great example. A, ability is the person's belief in their ability to make the change. When someone conveys their ability to change, they may use words like I can, or I could, or I'm able to, or this is possible. For example, you might hear things like in the employment realm, I can get a job, or if it's substance use, I could quit drinking. Um, or if it's a more social domain that the person is working on, it's possible for me to be in a romantic relationship. Ability language suggests that the person believes that the change is possible for them to achieve. R is the person's reasons for change. The reasons may sound like a rationale or justification or motive for making the change. Reasons often come in the form of if-then statements. So, for example, if I went back to school, then I could probably get a higher paying job. If I stop smoking, I will be able to save money that I'm spending on cigarettes right now or vapes. Or if I lose weight, I'll be able to better control my diabetes. Or if I eat healthier, I'll better be able to control my diabetes. N is a need for change, is the person, and it highlights the overall importance of the person's urgency to change. Need statements don't say specifically why change is important, but instead convey a general level of need. You may hear words like, I need to, I have to, or I can't keep doing whatever the person is doing. For example, you might hear things like, I've got to get a new job. I can't keep going on in this relationship. I must stop using alcohol every weekend. You want to be listening for this change talk and reinforcing it as you're hearing it. And some of the simplest ways to evoke change talk or get from the person their change talk is really asking open-ended questions. And in just a little bit, I'm going to go over OARS, which is another acronym, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, and we'll talk about those a little bit. But when you're hearing these types of change talk coming from the person, you want to elicit more by using some specific motivational interviewing skills, which we'll touch on in just a bit. Any questions so far? So these are just some examples that we just talked about. So desire, the person, you might hear something like, I want to socialize more with my coworkers. They want to do something. They wish they could do something. Ability, I can get a promotion at work. So they believe that that's possible. Um, the reasons for change, if I went back to school, then I could probably get a higher paying job. And then the need to change, I've got to get a new job, whether it's maybe transportation's not working out, maybe it's coworker situations, whatever that is, I've got to get a new job. Let me just peek in the chat really quickly. Someone just mentioned uh, someone's dad's personal change talk. I want my child's clothes to stop smelling like cigarettes. So absolutely. That's a great example. Thank you. So Dawn, I put in the chat and let's see. I wanted to see how we can do this with a large group. I'll also send it in the chat because I think everyone should be here. So if everyone could check to see if in the chat they can open up a document I just sent. It's called the Darn Ruler. And maybe you could just give me a show of hands or let me know that you're able to open it.
And I do
Okay,
see
perfect.
what it's having me do is to download it, which is certainly okay too, because then you can open it.
All right, are people seeing it for the most part? Okay, good.
I see lots
So,
of thumbs up.
yes. Um, Marlo, you have your hand raised?
That was an accident. I'm sorry. I meant to
Oh
do.
no, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure I got you. Yes. Zoom has some funky things that happen occasionally. Okay, good. So everyone's got it. So this is a tool um, to help you gauge where people might be in their change process. And it relates to the desire, ability, and reason and need. And this darn activity or darn ruler activity can help you understand where a person is regarding their motivation and help you identify activities, strategies, ways to help deepen their commitment to that change. So I don't know if anyone feels comfortable to volunteer to walk through, maybe not in, great detail or length, but just a preliminary walkthrough as we use the tool just as an example, um, thinking about a change that you're considering, a change that you're still debating making, so one that you're ambivalent about. So if we have a volunteer, that would be great. If not, I would like to walk through kind of independently and have you all kind of use that tool as I'm asking some of the questions so that you get a little bit of a sense of how to use it. So are there any volunteers? And I can turn off the recording during this part of the activity if that feels better for people. Okay, so Fernandez, did you say you are willing to volunteer?
Yeah, I can.
That'd be great. So I'm gonna mute, I'm gonna turn off the recording or pause it. So thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We'll move on to talking a little bit about mobilizing change talk. So mobilizing change talk builds on the preparatory change talk that we just talked about. The components of DARN represent that preparatory change talk, and CAT represents mobilizing change talk. And it includes commitment language, activation language, and taking steps. And in MI, these go by the acronym of CAT. So just like the preparatory change talk, it's important to be able to recognize mobilizing change talk so that you can reinforce it. So we'll talk a little bit about what commitment is. Commitment language are those words and phrases that people say that indicate the person has the intention or has made the decision to make the change. Commitment language can sound like I will, I'm going to, I intend to. And for an example, I will submit applications for a new job, or I intend to drink tea instead of coffee in the morning to reduce the amount of caffeine I have. Activation language conveys the person's willingness and readiness to change. It can sound like I'm ready, I'm planning, I'm prepared and willing to make the change. You might hear statements like, I'm ready to exercise, or I'm prepared to stop drinking. Taking steps refers to particular actions that the person has taken in the recent past that are linked to the target change or moving toward the target change. These sound like specific steps a person has taken. For example, you might hear things like, I started walking 1 mile a day and developed a plan to gradually increase this over the next month for someone who is working to improve their physical health. Or I collected applications from stores in town for someone who is interested in getting a job. Whereas DARN statements tend to be shared more when someone is still deciding to make a change, these CAT statements suggest that the person is ready to take action. So again, some examples. So another brief activity, and this will just use the chat or you can unmute your mic, because it's important to listen and hearing what preparatory change talk sounds like, what mobilizing change talk sounds like. So let's identify in this activity what type of change talk is being shared by each of these statements. So look closely at the verbs being used, as these will help you in identifying each type of change talk. So I'm going to read each statement and ask you to use the chat or unmute your mic. Probably the chat would work best with this larger group, and let me know what you're hearing: desire, ability, reason, need, those preparatory change talk that you might hear, or the mobilizing, commitment language, activating, taking steps. I think I could quit. What do you think that is? What does that most closely resemble? Ability, yep. So the person is recognizing, I think I could quit. how might you respond to that person? You can just use the chat, or if someone wanted to raise their hand and unmute your mic, how would you maybe amplify that or elicit more change talk from them? Okay, Colby, what would it take to help you quit? How would that look for you? Lisa mentions reinforce the ability and ask for some steps they may have in mind. What are some next steps? How about number two? I've got to do something about my drinking. What part of preparatory or mobilizing change talk does that most closely resemble? Need. Yep. They've got to do something. Think about how you might respond to that person to elicit more about that. Elicit, how would you reflect that back to them? Are there any open-ended questions that you might review to really hear more about that? How about I wish I were more comfortable around people? So maybe you're working with someone who has expressed to you that they have some challenges interacting with coworkers or supervisors or other people at their jobs. Yep, desire. How about I'd like to have better control of my drinking? Oh, I'm sorry. I want to get my kids back, and I can't do that unless I quit drinking. Reason. Yep. There's a reason, right? So if then, I mean, it might not look exactly like an if then, but how about I'd like to get better control of my drinking? Desire. How about I'm going to stop using? Commitment language. Yes. I'm ready to exercise. Activation. Yep. I redid my resume yesterday. Taking steps. Yes. So someone who said, I redid my resume yesterday, what are some ways that you can elicit more change talk or build on that change talk? You could use the chat or just unmute if that works best. What else would need to be done before you are completely ready for this change? Repeat back and ask for details on the results. Yep. Let's see. Affirmation. Miles kind of snuck ahead to what we're going to talk about next. Congratulations on the change. Count the wins. How does that make you feel? Eliciting kind of some feelings of success from that person. Absolutely. So let's move into eliciting change talk, and some strategies that we can look at for this. So the four core topics, um, or the four core motivational interviewing skills are open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. So this acronym is used to remember the skills. You probably do some version of them already, maybe without even knowing it, but we can all improve with more practice. So open-ended questions, instead of asking closed-ended questions, it's generally better to use open-ended questions. And open-ended questions really encourage the person to share. It allows them to provide more information, encourages a richer discussion. And when you're asking open-ended questions, you're listening more than you're speaking. You're allowing the speaker, the person that you're working with, the individual participating in services to lead the direction of the conversation, which really is kind of part of the spirit of MI. The speaker can share what they like and decide how they want to respond. So, what are some examples of open-ended questions that you might ask in your line of work? You can unmute or use the mic or use the chat. What's an example of an open-ended question in your world, in employment services or housing services? What does that look like for you? Yeah. Dawn, what kind of job is interesting to you? How can I better support you? What are you hoping to gain from employment? What kinds of activities do you enjoy? Yeah, so you're all probably doing a variation of ORs. What does your long-term goal look like, and where would you like to be? Can you show me what your future looks like career-wise? What types of employment applications have you utilized for searching online or in person? How can I help and support you to reach your goal? What has worked before? Yeah, so you're asking questions that don't require a yes or no answer or just a very brief answer. Where do you see yourself in 6 months, in 1 year, in 5 years? Yes. What would you like from employment services? How can I support you in making the change? If you were to start school, what would you need to consider? So those are examples. And again, this is, brief 1 hour webinar that we don't have the luxury of time to go into great detail, but I was hoping to maybe talk with Dawn and see if we can have a session just on ORs, in using ORs in employment. So I'm going to give an overview and some information, but maybe with the caveat that we'll have a more expanded training just on using ORs in employment services.
I think that's a lovely idea.
Yeah. So if we think about affirmations, are statements that recognize or highlight or emphasize a person's strengths, abilities, skills, efforts, and behaviors, particularly those that are related to making their change. Affirmations are a wonderful way to encourage relationship building, particularly in the beginning of the relationships. And affirmations can really help build confidence in the person that they can change. You want to always be looking for opportunities to affirm the person. And I think people wrote in the chat here a couple activities ago, celebrate the successes, recognize, congratulations on the win and the change, count the wins. Miles had said, affirmations are kind of a special type of reflection, which we'll get to in just a minute. You're reflecting back strengths and the person's efforts that you're noticing or that you heard in what they've shared. It might look like, let's see, I love that. No matter how small, celebrate the successes. And Kim just wrote in the chat, I work with people with disabilities. When they tell me about an adaptation they have made to support themselves, I tell them that shows you're a creative and problem solver. Yes, celebrate those successes. So affirmations can include commenting positively on an attribute. You're a survivor. You're a strong person. You have shown resilience in your life. It could be a statement of appreciation. I appreciate your openness today. I appreciate your honesty with sharing this information with me. If you see someone, participating in, if there are settings where you see someone interacting with other people, you could say something like, "You were really supportive today, with your peers in the group that I saw, or in the break room," whatever that might be. It might be an expression of hope or caring or support. You might say something like, "You'll do well in your interview today. You've practiced hard in all the role plays and you've made wonderful progress." Or it could reflect a value. You're passionate about advocacy. You have a strong work ethic. Um, it's important to not confuse an affirmation with a compliment. Affirmations are really specific. They're used to reinforce a behavior change and to acknowledge positive steps. Um, they really should always be sincere and genuinely provided. So what are some affirmations that you may have used in your work, or you think could be helpful? I know Kim mentioned the one about making sure, affirming creativity and problem solving among individuals, being positive, encouragement. We're proud of you for graduating. I'd hesitate to predict the future versus "you'll do well." Um, I think you're well prepared would be preferred. Yeah, and it depends on, the person that you're meeting with, whatever you're most comfortable with. Point out the successes, but it's also good encouragement when you've seen that the person might have done a really nice job in the role plays with in interviewing, and to kind of affirm that what you've seen the person accomplish so far. You do want to be careful. Um, I always try to keep it positive, and also reminding clients that where they have come from and how much they have accomplished, including the little things. You've got this, you're capable, pointing out their successes, um, point out the small wins. Yes, always genuine and sincere. Okay, so let's talk about reflections. So reflections you to can allow you to share with the person the message that you received from their communication, and check to make sure you're understanding correctly. Hello? And make sure you're understanding correctly, helping to address some communication errors. You're reflecting back what the person is telling you, and sometimes it might not be exactly what the person is telling you, and they can correct you. And I was doing the activity earlier with our volunteer. I may not have gotten everything right that they said, but I think that gives the person an opportunity to correct that. So it allows the person to hear what they've shared reflected back to them, kind of like a mirror reflecting back the explicit or implicit meaning of their words. Reflections demonstrate, or they can demonstrate, that you're listening and that you care about understanding the person's subjective experience, and that helps to build empathy. Um, Reflections can also allow you to emphasize parts of what the person has said and reinforce their change talk. Um, a reflection should highlight the key points of the message being conveyed. I tried to demonstrate that when we were reviewing the darn ruler activity. Um, so you're saying, reflecting back, maybe a paraphrased version of the words they've said. Um, there are more advanced reflections that, if we do have a more expanded topic on this, we'll get into. But you're kind of making a guess or a hypothesis about what that meaning might be that the person is sharing with you. Um, and you're reflecting back using terms like, maybe "it sounds like," or "what I heard you say is," "let me get this straight." So if I heard you correctly, you sound, Or so what you mean is, and you can also reflect feeling too. Um, you feel a certain way because whatever that might be. So if someone is talking to you about something that happened on the job, maybe they um, didn't get the promotion they wanted, or their hours were cut, and you can sense through their body language and through what they're sharing with you that they're really unhappy. You can say, um, you feel defeated, you feel upset, you feel frustrated because your boss didn't appreciate your um, uh, work that you've done, or you feel frustrated because your coworkers have decided to work on a project without you, whatever that might be, but you're reflecting back a feeling and also tying that to some of the content that the person is telling you. It's just one example of a reflection. And it depends, this also depends on the relationship that you've built. You certainly want to make sure that, your relationship is strong enough that you can reflect back what those feelings are that you're seeing, whether it's through the person's body language or through what they're saying. And they might say, well, no, Joni, I'm not frustrated. I'm actually really sad. Or, you know what, Joni, no, I'm not upset about it. I'm just confused as to how this happened. So even if they correct you, as long as you're doing it in the spirit of MI with genuineness and sincerity, and you're building that relationship is so critical. And then so we'll move to summaries, another way to elicit change talk, right? So summaries allow practitioners to reflect back any change talk that the person provides, and summaries are also useful in highlighting important elements of the entire discussion. They encourage continued expression and really deepening of the discussion, and they can highlight both sides of the person's ambivalence about the change. So you might be meeting with someone and you might be able to summarize at certain periods of time. So, after maybe the person has given you some information, and you might say something like, before we move on, let me just make sure I get this right. And then you might summarize what the person is telling you. Um, it could be used as a transition to the next point of discussion, or it could be used to summarize the entire meeting. So, before we end today, let me just make sure we're on the same page. Let me summarize. Let me make sure, I heard things correctly, and then you summarize back what that session might look like, or what the person was telling you, including any change talk that they talked about. So I just have some additional slides in here for your when I provide these, you'll see some additional slides that kind of expanded on those ORS areas. So sustained talk, the opposite of change talk is sustained talk, and it's language that suggests not changing or staying the same. Sustained talk conveys the person's desire to stay the same or maintain the status quo. The person may not be interested in making the change. They may enjoy or want to continue their behavior. Inability to change, the person may have a real or perceived belief that they can't change. They may want to make the change, but think they're unable to or not ready. Reasons to stay the same, while the person may feel or have some desire to change, they may not want to disrupt their life, or they may perceive other undesirable consequences of making the change. They may also have positive reasons to continue the current status quo. Need to stay the same or not change. The person may not see a need to change or you know make that change. Commitment to stay the same or not change. So change talk and sustained talk are often intertwined with each other, and this can represent the ambivalence that the person is experiencing. Generally speaking, you want to avoid reinforcing or following up on sustained talk. Um, Not to completely ignore it, but you don't want to really get the person talking against the change so much. You want to hear why they might be ambivalent, and because that could be certainly helpful, but you want to try not to reinforce a lot of this language that you might hear that reinforces kind of staying the same. Discord is also something we want to mention when we talk about listening for change talk. And discord is a normal reaction when feeling pressured or challenged to do something that you are ambivalent about. Um, Discord usually manifests itself as yes, but, and as practitioners, it's useful to view discord as feedback from the person to help us better understand and identify the types of strategies that might work best with the person to move them towards their change goals. The practitioner may need to move back to um, more reflections, more, back to evoking from the person what their reasons for change are. The discord could be viewed as the person and the practitioner making the person making the change and the practitioner maybe not being in agreement towards the next steps. Um, so we want to make sure, we recognize that. We recognize that it may not just be the person's disinterest. It may be that you're maybe not on the same page. So maybe going back to more of those listening skills. So before we move on, I'm going to put in the chat the presentation, Dawn, if that's okay, and just kind of summarize a bit while I'm doing that, just to make sure we have some time to ask any questions as I'm putting in the chat the materials. Are there what questions do people have?
There have been a handful of questions.
Okay,
And some responses to answers to the questions as well from the
great.
group. I love the way that goes.
Yes.
Yeah, and someone did ask about the slide. So Joni, I just wanted to mention to the group if anybody has difficulties downloading them for any reason, and I kind of don't think they will. I mean, it was easy enough to catch up with or to pull out
Yeah.
the examples. But if you have difficulties, let me know and I'll see what I can do about sending it to you.
Yes. Or I'll put my email address and you can get in touch with me and I will send that to you.
Great idea.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm getting, so what were some of the questions, Dawn, while I'm uploading the
Let me go back up and see if I can catch where, let's see. Q had talked about a grievance form that they were aware of that a person had done. Not so much a question, but just a comment.
Okay.
I see, I might be in the wrong spot. Samantha had said highlight change of behavior that has been difficult for them in the past, like refraining from conflict and having discipline. Ilana, I'm not sure I'm saying your name right. It said, do you ever provide alternative reflections? And that's the one where the group kind of went back and forth with, asking for examples, which Ilana provided, and kind of answering that. So, Ilana had said that she often provides two nearly opposite reflections to give them permission to correct her.
Great. I love that suggestion. And again, in our brief webinar here today, we didn't have a chance to get into all of the different types of reflections. There are simple reflections as well as more complex reflections. And hopefully we'll have a chance, Dawn, maybe in our November call to really dig into some of those OARS techniques specific for employment.
I do think that sounds like a great idea.
Yes.
These are complex skills. It takes
Yes.
practice in order to master them.
Absolutely.
And that feedback from others to know that what you're doing kind of fits the model. So I think it's
Yes.
a marvelous idea.
So we will do that, and let's move on to if we could kindly complete the survey, that would be great. You can use the QR code here, or, oops, let me grab that link.
Marcia, to answer your question, yes, you do need to register for the November class separately. If any of you are not receiving the Healthcare Authority FCS newsletter, where the links are placed in order for you to register for webinars, let me know and I'll make sure that you get on that distribution list.
I put my email and the survey there in the chat, so please, if you have questions, do not hesitate to get in touch. So just to summarize, we briefly talked about some of the skills to elicit change talk. We spent a significant amount of time looking at those preparatory change talk and mobilizing change talk and kind of recognizing what each looks like, and touched on how to amplify that change talk or elicit more change talk from the person, specifically related to employment services. And then we touched on the ORs, just a quick review of what some of those skills look like in practice. And it sounds like many of you are already using those skills and have some real good ideas of how you might utilize those moving forward. So thank you. And just as we're closing, let me give some references there. My email is also in the chat. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and participation today. Lots of participation. Dawn, it makes me realize we really need to have that November session on MI specific
Yep.
for employment services. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it. And please reach out if you have questions. My email is there in the chat, and hopefully you're able to download the PowerPoint. It should, yeah, it looks like it's, again, reach out if you have difficulties downloading that.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Fernandez.
Thank you.